Hey guys, Coffee Cranks here, and today I'm back with another video on Path of Exile. The Settlers of Kalgor League has been running for close to 2 months already, and at this point many people have considered transitioning from their league starters into some other builds. I'm no exception to that. While I really enjoyed playing my Summon Raging Spirit build, and it was quite a solid well-rounder that could do all kinds of content including bosses, it wasn't quite excelling at the zoom zoomy playstyle that so many people enjoy. And what is the one build that people run for that? That's right, Tornado Shot. Now the biggest issue with Tornado Shot builds is that they tend to be extremely pricey and can cost you upwards of 100 divines, and many people would consider that unaffordable. And while I did get extremely lucky dropping a Mage Blood this league, I still didn't want to build around it because it's just not my style. So I was looking for a way to make an affordable Tornado Shot build while sticking to my cardinal rule, and that is that most items should not be more than 5 divines. Initially, I was planning to build around Tornado Shot of Cloudburst, which is a new transfigured gem, but I came to realize that while the damage numbers looked good in POE, in practice it was just an awful skill and mechanically it was really clunky and I just couldn't get it to work, even though I suspect that there might be ways to build it and it just I didn't know how to. So maybe I'll give it another go in the future, but for now I must lay it to rest. So I went back to normal Tornado Shot, and while looking around noticed that most people were using Omniscience to scale it, which is of course insane and can give you a lot of damage, but it does cost a lot of money, so those builds are pretty pricey, so I didn't want to go there. So then I stumbled upon Voltaxic Rift, and while people wouldn't use Voltaxic Rift normally for Tornado Shot, I was thinking, why not? The uniqueness of Voltaxic Rift comes from the fact that it converts all of your lightning damage into chaos damage, which is super good because normally monsters resist elemental damage a lot more than they resist chaos damage. So before jumping into POE, my favorite part, I wanted to show you guys how the build actually works, so let's check it out. hope you guys enjoyed the showcase of the build, and now let's jump into POE and see how it actually works. So normally the very first thing that you look at in POE is the DPS, and in this case it's 9 million DPS. However, do keep in mind that it is tornado shot, which means it's projectile based, which means the numbers in POE might not always be 100% accurate. I cannot really tell you if 9 million DPS is enough or not. And again, that depends on what you consider enough. So in my case, I was running tier 16s, and as you could see from the showcase, it was more than enough to run the content that I like running. So in your case, maybe you want to do something else. So always ask yourself what it is that you need the damage for. So let's talk a little bit about the build mechanics. Now, I've mentioned this before, that Voltaxic Rift converts all your lightning damage into chaos damage, and that is good because monsters will have likely resistances towards elemental damage, but not necessarily towards chaos damage. But that's not all it does. On top of that, it makes it so any chaos damage that you do, or any chaos damage resulting from the conversion, can also shock the enemies, which is the property normally reserved only for lightning damage. When enemies are shocked, they take up to 50% increased damage based on how much damage you've dealt to them. Now, the third property of Voltaxic Rift, and that is also very good, is it increases the effect of that shock. So if the enemies are shocked, then they take even more damage than they would normally. TLDR is Voltaxic Rift is very efficient because it converts the type of damage that is very easy to resist into the type of damage that is very hard to resist. Also, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but any pieces of gear that can have both added lightning and added chaos damage to attacks will scale lightning damage much higher than chaos damage. So the chaos damage numbers will be much lower than the lightning damage numbers, meaning that if you just convert 100% of this into 100% of that, that's much more efficient to scale lightning damage than scaling chaos damage. The next aspect of the build is using critical strike chance and critical strike multiplier. So there are multiple ways to scale critical strike chance, and in this case I scaled it through the tree by using nodes like Assassination, for example, that gives you critical strike multi but also gives you critical strike chance. In this case I have 70% critical strike chance, which is honestly very normal, and you never really get to 100% critical strike chance, maybe on really expensive builds, because getting 100% is very inefficient, and most of the time 70% would be more than enough. Be wary of the maps where monsters take reduced damage from critical strikes, because what this means is that your critical strike multiplier is not going to be as efficient, and if it's a crit based build, like in this case, you will definitely feel the difference. Another thing you should pay attention to is the hit chance, and ideally you want that at 100%, even though something like 98% would be probably okay. But 90%, for example, is too low, and I would not recommend that because you'll just be missing out. 1 every 10 shots will be a miss, and then if you miss, you cannot crit, you cannot do damage, so that's pretty bad. Some maps will affect your accuracy, and your hit chance is not gonna be 100% anymore, which is why it's so important to keep it at 100% so it's not reduced by that much. So that's it for the offenses. Let's talk about the defenses. Now, when it comes to defenses, the build is a little bit on the squishier side, so I wouldn't really expect very good survivability from it, and especially if you're trying to fight bosses, which I wouldn't on this build, but if you do try to do that, do keep in mind that your survivability is probably not going to be that great. However, in the mapping scenario, you're going to do just fine because you kill things so fast that they have no chance getting to you. And if they do get to you, you do have some mitigation. For example, you have 72% evasion, and you have some physical reduction, which is increased if you turn on Granite Flask here. So you can see it goes up to 42%. And you also have 100% spell suppression chance. Right now I'm on my way to level 98, and it does feel pretty good. I very rarely die, and when I do die, it's like really crazy juiced up maps. And you could see from the showcase, I was running pretty crazy map. I actually thought that it was gonna kill me, but it didn't. It was totally fine. I was surprised that I survived, because normally I don't run maps like that. I try to exclude the dangerous modifiers because I do try to get to 100. And another advice I can give you, if you're also trying to get to 100, carry omens of amelioration in your inventory. So these omens are extremely useful when you're trying to level up, because what they do is normally when you die, you lose about 10% of experience. However, with omen of amelioration, it will get consumed when you die, but instead of 10%, you only will lose 2%. So that's pretty neat. Another thing to consider is the playstyle of this build. So when it comes to bow builds, most of them either prefer to be up close and personal, for example, using point blank, when the projectiles deal more damage at the beginning of their movement and less damage as they travel further away. Or, for example, this build that utilizes far shot and also long shot to do more damage with projectiles as they travel further away. So it depends on the situation. I would say in a lot of situations it's good to be further away, not only because you can do more damage with projectiles, but also it just feels safer because, you know, when you're up close and personal, the mob can smack you in the face, and a lot of times it doesn't end well. But with this playstyle, you stand further away and you don't have to worry about it as much. So the further you are from the monster, the better. Do keep that in mind. For the Ascendancy, you pick Deadeye, and the very first point is Gathering Winds, because this is just really good quality of life and damage output. So Gathering Winds gives you permanent tailwind, which is super important because you want to attack faster and move faster and do everything faster. And it also makes you gain Gale Force as you use Tornado Shot. So Gale Force will make the effect of Tailwind stronger, which means you're going to be even faster. So if you want to blaze through the maps at the speed of light, this is the very best Ascendancy to get. Next one, you want to take Far Shot, and like I explained before, you gain benefit from standing away from the monsters, so do try to incorporate that playstyle then when you're not really close to everything, but you try to take a little bit of a distance, and then you'll have increased damage from that. Third and very important one is Endless Munitions, because you gain 2 additional projectiles, which means that not using greater multiple projectile gem is not going to be as important because now you can finally have extra projectiles. You also have 2 more sources of extra projectiles. Multi-shot adds an extra projectile, and then you also have Master Fletcher, which also adds an arrow, which essentially is an extra projectile in other words. Now the last but not the least is Focal Point, which increases the effect of your marks. And because you mark the enemies automatically, which I will explain in a little bit how that works, it's really easy because it's just extra damage, and if the mob is particularly tanky, he's gonna be marked and he's gonna die much faster. So for the passive tree, it is meant for level 100. However, you can drop, for example, these life nodes or these 2 nodes, and you can get away with less. And for example, if you drop these, this is already level 97, and this is probably what I would aim at least 97. You don't have to go beyond that, but 97 is probably a sweet spot. And honestly, getting to 97 is pretty easy on this build. Like I said, it's very, very fast. I didn't even notice how I leveled to 97. That's how fast it was. For your skill gems, obviously you want a 6-link Tornado Shot, and then I also wanted to briefly talk about Mana Forged Arrows, because I think this gem is really confusing and the way it's worded is not very clear. So from the description, it's very confusing what this actually means and how do you do that, but let me try to explain it as much as I can. And if something is unclear, please let me know in the comments below and I will try to explain it further. Mana Forged Arrows is a support gem that supports any bow attack skill. Now this can be Frenzy, Lightning Arrow, any gem that has 2 tags, attack and bow. Mana Forged Arrows tracks the amount of mana that you would spend if you were to shoot Frenzy manually. So let's say it costs you 7 mana to shoot Frenzy. Triple that amount, 21 mana. And once you spend 21 mana on Tornado Shot, not Frenzy, Tornado Shot, then Frenzy will be procced automatically. So again, the mana cost is calculated from the frenzy, but you need to spend that much mana on Tornado Shot, and then Frenzy gets procced automatically and you don't have to do anything for it. So I know this is a little bit confusing, so again, please let me know in the comments below if this is still not very clear, and I will try to explain it further. So because you want to reduce the mana costs of Frenzy, because you want to proc it as much as possible, right? You want to link it to Inspiration, which reduces mana costs. But there is another interesting part to it, and that is Cast on Critical Strike. So Cast on Critical Strike is basically a support gem that supports attacks and then procs spells when those attacks crit. So in this case, attack is a frenzy, frenzy crits, and then you can proc any spell. So in this case, I proc Despair, which is a curse. So basically this way you get auto curse, again, without you doing absolutely anything, and you will get both frenzy charges and a curse in one easy setup, or not very easy, but hopefully understandable. Another setup is Mark on Hit, and Mark on Hit is basically a support gem that procs the linked mark when you hit a rare or unique enemy with an attack. In this case, it can be Tornado Shot, it can be Frenzy, doesn't matter. Assassin's Mark will proc, and Assassin's Mark gives you power charges. So it has 5% chance to grant a power charge when the monster is hit, which is good enough when you're fighting, let's say, a boss, because the boss is, you're not going to get power charge until the boss is dead, so you're not going to benefit from cursed enemies give you power charges when slain, but you will benefit from cursed enemies have a 5% chance to grant a power charge when hit, so this is how we generate power charges on bosses. So we have both frenzies and power charges, and with the normal monsters you also have increased critical strike chance, increased critical strike multiplier, and also life and mana when they killed. So this just basically increases your survivability and damage both. I'm also using Blood Rage, and some of you might be confused and be like, well, aren't we already generating frenzy charges with the Mana Forged Frenzy setup? And yes, we are, but the thing is, Blood Rage also gives you 20% increased attack speed, which is huge for this build because it gives you so much more damage. For example, if I turn off Blood Rage, you can see that the damage goes down quite significantly. So this is very important. Normally, I hate how Blood Rage degens your life. So if you run around without any life regen, you will notice that your life just like... And this is very annoying. It can be very, very frustrating, especially if you suddenly run out of life flask charges and you just keep degenning. So what I do to offset it is I normally use Vitality. In this case, level 20 Vitality is plenty, and I'm actually having a plus net life recovery, so you're not gonna degen. Some maps will have reduced life recovery, and in those maps you will be degenning somewhat, but still not as much as without Vitality. Without Vitality, it would be very bad and like uncomfortable to run those maps. Some bow builds completely skip on Stillskin. I personally don't do that. I do want to incorporate Stillskin almost in every build that I play, or in every build that I play, because I feel like it just helps so much with just random one-shots and whatnot. And yeah, you don't have to worry about it. It's an automation setup, so it will be automatically procced. And then Val Haste is not obviously automatic, but this build is easy. You don't have to click almost on anything. You click on Tornado Shot, then you click on Blood Rage at the very beginning of the map, and then it's pretty consistent. Like, you don't have to ever click on it again, almost ever. And the only other button that you click is Val Haste, and sometimes you would have like 4 uses of Val Haste per map, maybe even more, depends on the kind of mechanics that you run. For example, I'm running a lot of breaches, so Val Haste keeps just coming back for me multiple times per map, and it's really good because, again, it increases your attack speed, increases your movement speed, just making you even faster, if that's even possible. So yeah, it's big boost to your damage and quality of life. The only other gems that I didn't cover were Grace and Wrath for your main auras, and Grace obviously gives you evasion rating and Wrath gives you additional lightning damage to attacks. And also I'm using Flame Dash as my movement skill. You could use Blink Arrow, just keep in mind that Blink Arrow only has one use, so if you're in a sticky situation and you need to move twice with a movement skill, then you cannot really do it with Blink Arrow, but you can do it with Flame Dash, and that's why I'm using Flame Dash. So now let's talk about items, and I already mentioned Voltaxic Rift. I will just add to it that if you have the Harvest Bench and the Juice, you can craft quality does not increase physical damage, 1% increased attack speed per 8% quality, which gives you 2% increased attack speed in total for 20% quality. Quiver is a very important gear slot for almost any bow build, and this build is no exception. I only have one defensive stat on it, and that is maximum life, which is a very important stat, and you should have it on most pieces of your gear, except maybe body armor. So in my case, I got a quiver with lightning damage to attacks, obvious. Increased critical strike chance, again, obvious. Critical strike multi, obvious. Increased projectile speed, so this one is not obvious. So the way it works is, let's say projectiles have 5 seconds to travel total, right? And they travel at a certain speed. If you increase projectile speed, in that time allocated, they can travel further, and that's exactly how that works. So when you increase projectile speed, they just travel further. So when you have that playstyle that you have to stand a little bit away from the monsters, this affix actually is very helpful, and that's why it's so good to have it on the quiver. And the last one is increased damage with bow skills, which is again very obvious, just generic increase to damage. So this is definitely not the perfect quiver. You could try to get bow attacks fire an additional arrow. I think that would really improve the quality of life and also the spread of the projectiles, because you basically have only 5 projectiles, right? If you add an extra projectile, you can cover bigger area and clear maps much more efficiently, so that will definitely be an upgrade in, you know, clear speed and damage both. So yeah, but this quiver is pretty good. If you get something like that, that's good enough. You don't really need to go out of your way and try to find the perfect quiver, because it's not really necessary. So this is good enough. So the helmet, body armor, gloves and boots all should have both armor and evasion rating, so that you increase both your physical damage reduction and your evade chance. You have plenty of spell suppression on the tree, but you still need to cap it to get to 100%, and I wouldn't recommend going for tattoos, because the tattoos, each one is like over 4 divines, so that's really pricey, and they only give you 2% each, so that's not really worth it at all. I would go for spell suppression on the helmet, body armor and boots, but not on the gloves, because on the gloves it's better to get attack speed and then to craft increased damage while leeching, and you also want resistances on it, and attack speed and resistances are all suffixes, and so is spell suppression. So you kind of, if you get spell suppression, you cannot get the other affixes. So I would skip spell suppression on gloves, go for spell suppression on boots, because on boots you only want chaos resistance, movement speed, spell suppression, and then to craft other resistances. On body armor, again, very easy, you only need 1 resistance there, and spell suppression, and to craft more resistances. And on the helmet, you also want to have accuracy rating, by the way. So you want 1 piece of gear to have accuracy rating, and it probably should be a helmet. And you want at least, I would say this much to get to 100% hit chance. If you can get better accuracy, that's even better. Then you can drop some accuracy rating tattoos. So as you can see, I'm using, I think it was like 11 tattoos for global accuracy rating. They're not too expensive. There's also 1 tattoo with chance to blind enemies on hit with attacks, which makes you tankier. But the rest of the tattoos are all global accuracy rating, as you can see. Very important, you don't want life on your body armor. So you don't want either maximum life or life regen. Both of these count as a life modifier, and the reason is you have this mastery that gives you 15% increased maximum life if the body armor has no life modifiers. And life modifier is again either maximum life or increased life regen. Either of these. And the only exception to this is, let's say you have extreme amount of life on your body armor, like 140 life, 150 life, then you can get life on the body armor and drop this mastery, and then it would be fine. But until then, definitely go for mastery instead of the life on body armor, because otherwise it's just not going to be worth it and you're going to end up with less life. So make sure to note which Eldritch Crafts I use on the pieces of gear, because most of them boost your damage quite significantly. For example, on the helmet you want to have increased attack damage and increased Despair Curse effect. On the body armor you want increased effect of Wrath and critical strike multiplier for attack damage. On the gloves you want increased effect of your marks and increased attack speed, which is super good. And on the boots you want increased cooldown recovery rate and increased action speed, and action speed again is movement speed, attack speed, any kind of speed. Another very important gear slot is the amulet slot. So for example, if I remove the amulet, you can see that my damage is basically halved. So the amulet itself is very good. It basically increases your projectile speed, and also projectiles that have chained, which are like the secondary projectiles of Tornado Shot, gain 29% of non-chaos damage as extra chaos damage, so that's super huge. You also leech some chaos damage as life, which is your primary source of leeching on this build. And skills chain +1 times, which makes the secondary projectiles chain, and it's just really good for clear speed. So the corruption on this amulet says you can apply an additional curse, and this is something that you should be getting. So you should buy this amulet with this corruption. The reason is we're using both Despair Curse and Assassin's Mark, and the only way to use both is to have the ability to dual curse. And through this implicit is how you dual curse. Now, once you get the amulet, you can enchant it, and the way you enchant a corrupted amulet, so normally this enchantment is Force of Darkness, right? It uses prismatic oil and 2 opalescent oils. So normally to enchant an amulet, you need to put 3 oils together into the blight window and then enchant the amulet, right? So to enchant a corrupted amulet, you need to add the same oils, but also put the tainted oil together with the oils, and that will allow you to enchant a corrupted amulet. And you can buy tainted oil, for example, on trade. I forgot the price, but it's not too pricey right now. So yeah, once you get the amulet, it's a huge increase to damage. So yeah, make sure to get it with a corruption, and then you can enchant it with a tainted oil. Now the rings are very tricky, and the reason is because you need a combination of different things. So the first thing that you want on the rings is attributes. So as you can see, one ring has +49 to intelligence, another ring has +49 to strength, and then I also have 3 Viridian jewels. All of them have at least +14 to intelligence. I was basically meticulously calculating it in POE to make sure that my intelligence is capped, my strength is capped, so that I don't have a situation where I would actually have to allocate either prowess or Thief's Craft. So yeah, make sure that doesn't happen. Worst case, you can take one of those, it's not a big deal, but it's better to have it on the rings if you can. You also want an open prefix on both rings to make sure to craft non-channeling skills have -7 to total mana cost. Otherwise, you'll be running around, running constantly out of mana on your Tornado Shot, and that wouldn't feel so good. So yeah, this is very important. Then, of course, you want life, and you want a bunch of resistances, so, you know, everything else is kind of standard. And ideally, you want amethyst rings to cap your chaos resistance. So as you can see on this build, resistances are also kind of, like, you could use, for example, one way to combat this is to use a Lyra for bandits instead of kill all, but it's kind of, it feels like I can cap my resistances without, so I didn't use a Lyra, but like with attributes, you can also choose to go with a lyre instead, and then your resistances will be a little bit more manageable. But I feel like resistances is not as complex as attributes, because attributes is much trickier to cap. Another slot, and that one is my favorite, is Headhunter, and the reason I incorporated it into the build is because I was meaning to include it into the build from the get-go. The build was very Headhunter centric, and I was trying to build something that could benefit from Headhunter buffs. And partially because Headhunter is cheap again this league. I don't know the price right now. It was like 15 divines last time I checked. So this is actually a major part of the price of the build. Like Headhunter is the most expensive item on this build. Everything else is fairly cheap. Headhunter is the only item that's going to be more than 5 divines. But it does add a lot of clear speed to this build, so make sure to get a Headhunter. It's the ultimate belt for this build. I don't think you can do any better. If you build around Mage Blood, you can probably get a much higher damage and get a pretty decent boss killer, but this is not what this build is about. So this build is about Headhunter, it's about speed, it's about running fast. So you do want a Headhunter, and make sure to get as much strength on it as possible. You don't care about dexterity, you'll be fine with dexterity, but make sure to get very high roll on the strength. And don't forget to apply your catalyst to all your jewelry. So apply catalyst to the belt with attribute modifiers, and then apply resistance modifier catalyst to both rings to get the most out of your resistances. Now for the jewels, I am using Forbidden Flame and Flash, which are very cheap ones. So these are like 150C together, I think. So Forbidden Flame with Nature's Reprisal and Forbidden Flash, again, with Nature's Reprisal, make sure they match. So Nature's Reprisal is basically increasing your cow's damage, because it gives you a chance to inflict Withered on hit, and Withered is a buff that increases your cow's damage and then increases effect of Withered. So basically you get a very, very huge boost to your damage. As you can see, it shows it adds like 3.6 million DPS. I don't know if that's true, but that's a very, very big boost to damage. For the cluster jewels, go with increased lightning damage, large cluster jewel. So you only need one large cluster jewel, and make sure to get at most 8 passive skills. That's important. Do not get 9, do not get 10, get 8 passive skills at most. And you need to have Disorienting Display, Overshock, and Thunderstruck as the added passives. And you also want, not necessarily, but you can get some small passive skill effects like lightning resistance or whatever, like maybe some attributes even. Then you also want 2 medium cluster jewels. They are the same, both of them increase projectile damage types, and both of them have repeater and streamlined. So as you can tell, both of them have the same rolls. And then one has increased intelligence, another one has increased projectile speed plus strength. You don't necessarily need that, but it will help to have something like +2 attributes or +2 resistances. Probably attributes is more important because you struggle with it so much on this build, so that will help. And that's it for the cluster jewels. Now for the normal jewels, you need 3 Viridian jewels, and all of them should have attack speed with bows, life, intelligence, and then the other roll can be any damage roll that you can get. For example, this one has global crit multi, that's ideal, but if you can't have that, you can have something like crit chance, increased lightning damage, increased chaos damage, whatever you can get that's actually beneficial. Attack speed. So one of them can be also corrupted, with the corrupted blood cannot be inflicted on you. This is a huge quality of life. So because you are attacking so fast and run around so fast, it's very easy to get high amount of stacks of corrupted blood. But if you have a jewel like that, corrupted blood will not be inflicted on you, and you don't have to worry about suddenly your life going. The last jewel is the Balance of Terror. So this one is kind of arguable because we already are using Nature's Reprisal, which makes us inflict Withered. But because you want to build the Withered stacks very fast, it makes sense to have another source of Withered. Also, this gives you a little bit of elemental resistances, so that's useful. Feel free to replace this jewel with something else because honestly, you can experiment and maybe there's a much better jewel. For example, there could be one of the timeless jewels that would give you a lot of extra damage potentially. I haven't tried yet, but you can feel free to replace this jewel with something else. And the last one is the flask section, and that one is pretty straightforward. So you want to get Dying Sun because pretty much any bow build uses Dying Sun because it gives you 2 additional projectiles, and that's really, really good for the damage. You also want a life flask with partial instant recovery and immunity to bleeding. And then what you want is you want Silver Flask, Granite Flask, and Quicksilver Flask. All 3 of those should have a prefix chance to gain a flask charge on crit because you crit a lot. It's a crit based build, so you do gain a lot of benefit from that prefix. You will gain consistently flask charges even when you're fighting a boss and you don't kill any other monsters, because that's important. It's like a sustain of flasks during situations where you don't have any other monsters spawning, so you cannot really gain flask charges from a lot of different monsters. Now, the suffixes can go in no particular order, so like Silver Flask can have any of those suffixes, Granite Flask can have any of those suffixes, and so on. The 3 suffixes that you want are increased critical strike chance during effect, increased armor during effect, and increased movement speed during effect. So armor is because you don't necessarily want to increase evade chance because you already have a lot of evasion, and that one wouldn't increase your evasion by any significant amount. So you're better off with armor because armor is something that's pretty low on this build. So for example, if I activate Granite Flask, suddenly I have 42% physical damage reduction, and that's a big boost. And then you want increased critical strike chance, again, because we are a crit-based build. So for example, if you activate that, you get 75% instead of 70. Not that big of a boost, but it does matter somewhat. And then increase movement speed because you just, again, want to be very, very fast and just blaze through all your maps at the speed of light. So before I conclude the POB tutorial, I do want to mention that what really boosts the damage on top of everything else that I covered before is the purple Tornado Shot MTX. Definitely get it. I felt like my damage increased by like at least 35%. I would say it's 35 to 38%. Yep, that's the accurate numbers. Do not get Celestial because I felt like Celestial was only 25% increase, so I would go with the purple one. It also looks cool, so yeah, there's that. So you can check POB notes section and you'll see all the prices and how much I spent on each slot of gear. I gotta say, like, this is not really, I mean, maybe when you are buying gear, it's gonna be different. Maybe cheaper, maybe more expensive. I can't really tell. I felt like it was really inexpensive for a Tornado Shot build because Headhunter alone is like 15 divines. So basically the rest of the gear is overall 30 divines, which is not that much if you consider that's like for all of the gear slots. And again, this is a Tornado Shot build. Last time I played Tornado Shot was at least, I think, 150 divines that I spent on it. And that was probably like a lower end of Tornado Shot. I think the builds that I see on POE Ninja are probably upwards of 400 divines realistically, and there's no way that I'll be able to afford that or will be able to find those pieces of gear at all. So yeah, I wanted to go for something realistic for maybe a lot of other people, and I hope you guys can also afford this build, and I hope you guys can have fun with it. And I just wanted to create something that was like easier to put together than a really expensive version of it. And obviously if you have the money and you have the gear, Of course, it's better to play a really busted tornado shot build, but this is like, you know, a poor man's version of tornado shot, let's just call it like that. And for what it is, I think it's doing a pretty good job. Now, I also wanted to mention the map mods, so be careful which maps you're running, because Physical Reflect will absolutely kill you. It killed me. I tried it, I wanted to test it out, how it works, and it didn't work. I died pretty easily from it. So do not run Physical Reflect. Other than Physical Reflect, you can pretty much run anything except no regen and no leech. So do avoid no regen, no leech. Because no regen is just simply annoying. No leech really removes a very important defensive layer, which is the leech, and also you even get increased damage from leeching. So yeah, do not leech maps, it's a bad idea. Do not regen is just simply torture. Nobody should be running those. But aside from those, I think pretty much everything else is fair game. If you don't like dying too much, I would avoid the monster steal power and frenzy charges, because you actually getting both frenzies and powers. So if the monsters are stealing them from you, you're not gonna have a good time with that. And minus maximum resistances is another mod that really kills people quite a lot. Other than that, I don't think there's anything really that crazy that I would necessarily avoid. Yeah, that's it. Everything else you can absolutely safely run, and it's not a problem. So that's it for today's video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments below what you think about it. And please do not crucify me for using budget in the same sentence as 45 divines. I promise this is a budget tornado shot build. I swear. I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody. It is a budget tornado shot, okay? But yeah, please don't be upset about it. You can stop by my stream at twitch.tv/coffeecranked and tell me all you think about me. So I'll be streaming on Sunday from 12 to 5 p.m. Central European time, and I'll be playing this build specifically, so I'll be running lots of maps with lots of breaches, and make sure to stop by and check it out. And until then, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!